Mrs. Martha Sullivan is a faith-integrated counselor for care and counseling services at Baptist Health South Florida. She specializes in helping children, adolescents, adults, families, and couples work through disruptions and crisis. Mrs. Sullivan is a registered nurse and received a master's degree in nursing education from the University of Puerto Rico. She is also a licensed mental health counselor and received a master's degree in counseling psychology from Trinity International University. Please join me in welcoming Mrs. Martha Sullivan.
Today I'm going to start talking a little bit about human development in diverse cultures and family systems, as it says on the slide. I'm also going to help you out a little bit with, give you a little bit of psychology to help you with what it's like when you go to the house for the first time. Because one of the things you'll be doing is the DCF will call you and you'll be going out to a house, a person that has agreed to have you come to their house, and you might be feeling a little nervous because you're coming to someone's house that you don't know. I want you to be aware of how you're feeling and be aware of your surroundings, because you're nervous, you're going to a new place, you're going to meeting some new people, and you may not really pay attention to your surroundings. But for your safety, it's really important. You know, is there a dog in the yard? Are you approaching the house by yourself? Are there people around in the neighborhood? What's going on? And then to help yourself relax. Think about it. What do you do to help yourself relax? Maybe, or to calm yourself. Maybe a good way would be to take some deep breaths, inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth. Or maybe you have a prayer or a scripture that you listen that helps relax you. Maybe there's something that you say, like a mantra, like you might say, I belong to you, Jesus, or something like that, to help make you feel a little bit more comfortable. And remember to just be relaxed as the best you can. And when you're aware and you have oxygen and you're breathing well, then it also helps you to make better decisions and helps you to think clearer. So you're going to be entering a house to somebody that you may not know, and you may not know what their culture is like. And the one way you say, like, what is culture, and how can I be aware of what my culture is, this person's culture is like? One of the things you might want to think about is these questions, because these are really some basic questions that let you know a little bit about what people are like from different cultures. Like, what is the polite way to greet a stranger? Or how do you greet a friend or a family member? How do you say hello or goodbye? In many Latin cultures, or Latinos, or people, when they meet each other, they greet each other with a kiss. But when some people may not feel very comfortable with that. I'm from the Panhandle, from North Florida area, and I remember my first cultural experience was when a friend of mine from Peru walked me to class. She was lost, and I helped her find her way, and when I found the class that she was supposed to go to, she reached over and gave me a kiss on the cheek. Well, that had never happened to me ever in school. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's got the wrong idea about me. But the truth is that something was very cultural, and that's something that she did, and that's normal. But for me, girls did not kiss each other on the cheek, and nobody kissed me on the cheek except for my grandmother. Not even my mom or my dad did that. So from my cultural point of view, that was something that I wasn't really prepared for. So another thing to think about is body space. Can I have a person that would want to be a volunteer from the audience? Does anybody want to volunteer to demonstrate body space? You going to come up here? Okay, great. Thank you. We all have, based on our cultures, a certain amount of space around our body that we feel comfortable with. Hi, what's your name?
Rosie.
Okay, Rosie, I want you to tell me when you start to feel uncomfortable. Do you feel uncomfortable when I'm right here?
I feel comfortable right there.
Comfortable right there? What about right here?
No, at all.
Not at all? Okay. All right. So what would happen? You'll notice when you get too close, people back up. Do you really want to back up? Right, right. That's what happens with body space. So you have to be sure that you're not getting too close. Some people here is about how close you can be. And some people here, and some people are very comfortable with close space, but you have to be aware that you're not making someone feel uncomfortable because you're sitting too close or getting too close to them when you talk. Thank you very much. Another thing that you think about in culture is discipline children. Now, how many of you use corporal punishment? That means, do you spank your children? Do you hit them with a chancleta? What do you do to help train your children to discipline them? Some people send them to the room. There's different ways. And not, as long as you're disciplined with love. I mean, me personally, I would never hit my child. I don't do that. I don't teach people to do that because maybe that's why the person that is in DCF in the first place involved, because they hit their child, but they hit their child too hard, in the wrong place, in anger, not in love. So it's important to be respectful of the way someone disciplines their child, but of course, if you see something too severe, you would report it. But when you walk into a room and there's a child there, it's important for the people that are visiting to realize they're the visitor. They're not the one who disciplines the child. Parents usually don't like you to say, hey, to tell your child their child what to do, like get off the table, stop doing that, be quiet. That's really not your job as a visitor. The parent's job is to control their children, not you. And how would you feel if someone came into your house and started telling your children what to do? So you begin to understand culture when you understand your own culture. So one thing I had to understand in my culture, body space was different. I had to understand that I don't do a lot of touching when I talk to people. And I know that some people will come up to me and lay their hand on my shoulder when they're talking to me, and they're very comfortable with that, but I don't really feel necessarily comfortable with that. So I had to understand my own point of view so that I could be able to see how it was different than some other person's point of view. Another thing you want to find out is who's the leader in the family. Like you may be talking to the husband or the man in the house, but the one who really makes the decisions in the house is the wife, or it could be the other way. And each culture has its own hierarchy of who is the person who is supposed to be the leader in the house. And it may not be who you think should be the leader, but it is what it is in that particular family and that culture. And so it's something to be aware of and to accept. So you may be asking the wife or the woman in the house, do you need something and what can I bring you? But it could be the grandmother that's going to decide whether this can come into her house or not. So it's good to find out who is the person who's making the decisions in the house so that you're talking to that person. But the main thing that we want to think about is showing love. So love comes from God, and God is love. That's 1 John 4:8b. So we love by caring and listening. And listening means that we are not thinking about the next thing that we're going to say, but that we're going to be able to really pay attention to what that person is saying. Have you ever, you're talking to somebody and you can't wait to say what you want to say? Well, while you're thinking about what you want to say, you're not listening to what the other person is going to say. Remember that even if these people say that they're a Christian, when they're in a crisis, they may be questioning even in their own values. How many times has something really terrible happen in your life, maybe a death in the family or a car accident or some kind of lose your job, and you start thinking, God, what did I do? Are you really there? And it's a very common thing to happen so it's important not to judge. Another reminder is that when people don't have a place to live, or they don't have any food, or they don't have clothes, then their priority is eating and having a place to live and food. Have you ever been really hungry and looking for, or thirsty and looking for something to drink? And then you're not really thinking about prayer, or maybe sometimes you might be really hungry or thirsty, and you may not even think about being polite because you're like so hungry or thirsty. So try to think about where this person or family is, and when you go to their home, and where they are and what they need. Our basic needs are air, water, nourishment. So if we don't have those things, we're not really thinking about maybe some of the other things like stylish clothes or being nice. I'm going to talk more once these safety and these basic needs are met. It gives room for a child to develop. I've seen in places where children who've been removed from their homes, and the child really is not doing well in school because they don't have a place of safety, or they don't feel loved. And once that need is met, then they can concentrate more in school. When you think about growth and development, it goes in an orderly fashion. The way God made us, He made us in order. Order is the way God works in the world. So a baby or a child, their development comes from simple to complex, head to foot. I'm going to talk first about newborn to 3 months. And I'm going to use some theories from a developmental psychologist, Jean Piaget, and I'm going to also talk about some ideas from Erickson. I want you to understand, on one side is the normal things that you're going to see in a newborn, and then on the other side you're going to see if these things aren't happening, what would be abnormal. Now, when you have a baby that's 3 months old, you're going to expect them to be holding their head up, right? You're going to be expecting them to smile at you when you look at them. 3 months are already starting to have two-way communication where they're smiling at their mom. They know who their parent, their mother is, or their primary caregiver. They're interested in the world around them. Now, you see a 3-month-old that's not crying, that's listless, not moving much, you're going to think maybe they're sick, and you're probably, unless they're just really tired or sleepy, then there may be something wrong. Also, a 3-month-old should be able to sleep without difficulty and should be able to look when you speak to them. So if they're not doing that, then these are some things some red flags. The next age group we're going to look at is 3 to 6 months. They're going to have really good head control now, and they pass through a process which is called falling in love. When you're taking care of a child, they're not only are you falling in love with the child, but the child falls in love with you too. It goes back and forth. So when you come into a room and a baby doesn't know you, they haven't fallen in love with you. So it's not really, you don't pick up someone else's baby, especially not without their permission. And you could expect that they may not know you, or they may cry when you pick them up because they're not familiar with you. You expect at this age that the baby's going to coo and gurgle. They're going to make sounds. A baby who doesn't talk is a baby who doesn't make those sounds, a baby who is not hearing maybe, so that he doesn't know how to make those sounds. But all babies all over the world, no matter where you go at this age, are going to make gurgling and cooing sounds. Babies are born with the ability to learn any language. The baby may during this age will be starting to sit up towards 6 months by themselves. You call them a sit-along baby. I had a relative that the child never could sit up. He couldn't hold his head up. He couldn't turn over at this age. And it turned out he had a problem. He wasn't developing right. He didn't have good muscle control. So if you find these things out soon enough, then you can start giving them treatment and the children can have a better prognosis. So if you see things like this when you go to visit, it's good to tell your leaders so that maybe they can recommend that the children get more care or more assessment. The next age that we're going to look at is 6 months to 1 year. During this stage, we're going to be looking at the developmental milestones of developing trust versus distrust. So when a baby is receiving all the things that they need from their mother, if the baby cries and the mother goes and picks him up and they comfort him and gives them food or nourishment if that's what they need, or if the baby's cold, they give him clothes. If the baby's too hot, they take clothes off. If the baby's just uncomfortable or needs to be held for a little while and the mother provides that need, the baby knows that the world is safe. They know that if I have a need, something or someone is going to help me meet that need. Now, so you say, well, how does a baby develop distrust? Well, it used to be thought that a good thing to do is when a baby cried, the way to teach them to stop crying at this age would be to just let them cry until they stop crying. Well, what happens is the baby stops crying, but he also stops believing that anyone's going to take care of them. And this is the beginning of distrust. During this time, the baby's going to start learning to speak. They're going to be able to say mama and dada. Isn't it awful when they start to learn to say papi first? My daughter did that. The baby at this age, too, will be able to turn away if they don't like someone. And actually, using videos from children that have been abused or have been around an abusive family, you can determine that the baby does not trust the parents, because when the mother picks the baby up, the baby will turn away and actually arch their back away from mother. So even at this early age, you can start seeing the effects of abuse, maltreatment, or neglect. During this stage, when the person is able to develop trust, then they also develop hope. So their spiritual development is beginning already at this age. If you believe that no matter what you do, no one's going to come to you and comfort you, then you develop a sense of hopelessness, that no one's going to help you. So by meeting the needs of the child, you're helping them to learn to hope, and you're helping them to learn to begin their spiritual development so that someday they'll be able to hope in God. Children also have a cognitive development during this age, and they're learning to learn about the world through their senses. So, how many you see during this age that the child is going to be putting things in their mouth, and everything that they pick up, they put in their mouth. They learn that's how they learn. So they learn by looking, listening, hearing, touch, taste. There's no real awareness of right and wrong. They react as if they cause the emotions in others. So that means that if you put a baby at this age in the room and the mother's crying, the baby will probably cry too because she'll think that she did something to cause the mother to cry. So then this is why when you cannot have families with domestic violence in front of the children. So if the parents are fighting with each other in front of a child this age, already the child can develop what's called post-traumatic stress, and the baby would feel unsafe and feel the emotion in the room. So children at this age can pick up emotion, but they do not understand emotion. For them, whatever's going wrong around in the family, they believe it's something that they did. So there's no understanding of right and wrong. So the children in like 2 to 3, they're going to obey because they don't want to get punished. But they're not obeying because they understand that what they're doing is wrong. The next stage is 1 year to 3 years. And during this stage, the children should be able to imagine, to have imaginary play. That means that they can pretend that a rock is a man and a box is a house. They're able to say that, change the way things are in their mind and imagine and making up stories. They're able to use their hands and stack blocks, and they're learning to have what's called autonomy. That means they're learning that they can do things for themselves. If a child is not able to do certain things for themselves, or the parent shames them and says no, like what happens during this age? Potty training, right? So if the child doesn't able to have that own sense of control of their body and for potty training, then they may feel shame and doubt. And how many times have you heard parents, whenever the child like has an accident, wets their bed or has an accident in their clothes, instead of just normalizing, well, this happens sometimes with children, and all we have to do is change the clothes. But sometimes parents will shame the child and say, oh, you shouldn't have done that. You don't know how to take care of yourself. And then that's where the shame and doubt comes in. During this stage, children are able to jump and to run. And this next picture kind of gives you a good idea of what a 2-year-old looks like. Oh, sorry. There we go. Isn't that a very independent 2-year-old? You've all heard of the terrible twos, right? I think the terrible twos are not terrible at all. They're just a young child learning to say no. And that's kind of the word they'll say all the time. You ask them, do you want ice cream? No. Even though they like it, they'll say no. Because they're learning that word no. And it's a good word to learn. People who never learn to say no are the people in church that you say, would you bake a cake Friday night? And you'll go, yes, I'll do it because I need to. Or will you take care of the children's church on Sunday? And you're like, well, I really need to go to church myself. But you'll say yes because you haven't learned to say that word no. So it's a good thing to have a child learn to say no. And you really can't argue with a 2-year-old. So usually what parents can do with a 2-year-old is use other methods to let them understand what you want them to do. If you don't help a child at this age to have that sense that they can say no, you run the risk that when they're older and they're like, say, 16, and they haven't learned to say no to some of the bad things, now you're trying to teach them no, and they haven't learned it yet, so it's harder to learn at that age. I kind of equate the terrible twos is to a precursor to 16. Because you see some of the very same behaviors in the 2-year-olds that you're going to see when they become adolescents, and they're trying to exercise independence and start to go out into the world. When a 2-year-old throws things down or says no, they're not being bad. They're just being who they are. Do you understand that part? Does that make sense? Oh, wait. There we go. Oh, sorry. Now, the next stage is 3 to 5 years age. In this stage, the child is learning initiative. So they're going to try to do a lot of things. This is a great age to teach them and let them help you. They'll say, "Mommy, can I help you clean the house?" And the parents are going to think, "What can a 4-year-old do? What can a 3-year-old do?" But they can do a lot of things. And so this is the time for you to give them things that they can do. They can maybe feed the dog. They can help you set the table. And this gives them a sense of initiative when they accomplish something that you've asked them to do. They're learning to think differently, too. They're learning to connect ideas. But they may not connect them correctly, but they still connect them in a logic 4-year-old way. I can think of an example with this age was when my daughter, we lived in Puerto Rico, and one of my friends asked my daughter, "Where's your grandmother?" And my daughter points up like this, and the person's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, your grandmother's, with Jesus or something." And I'm like, no, it's not that. It's that when we go visit grandmother, we have to go up in an airplane to go visit grandma. So you see, it was very logical for her, but she didn't really understand that when you go up, you also come down and you land on earth again. So that's the way she was thinking. That's kind of the way. And so 4-year-olds will have, I love talking to a 4-year-old because they will solve the world's problem. They have an answer for everything. They may not be logical, but for an adult's way of thinking, but it isn't a logic sequence for that child. In part of learning initiative, the child learns purpose. And one of the examples of that, I don't know if you heard of the writer, his name is Henry Nouwen. Has anybody heard of it? He wrote the book, The Wounded Healer. When he was this age, his grandmother made him a little outfit like a priest with the hat, and he would, in his play, he would already give communion to his friends. So he was already playing out and had an idea of what his purpose in life was. And he became a priest, a Catholic priest, and a very well-known and prolific writer. If the children are not able to learn initiative, then they feel guilty. They feel like maybe, like I remember as a 4-year-old, I had bought my mom had bought me new clothes. And I was so proud of those new clothes. And when my aunt came over, I said, "Look at my new clothes." And then my aunt was thinking I'm bragging. So she told my mom that I was bragging and that was not right. And then I felt guilty. But I was really just doing what a 4-year-old would do. See my new shoes, see my new clothes. I wasn't bragging. I didn't know how to be proud. And my aunt interpreted it the wrong way, and then I felt guilty. And it took me a while. I mean, I don't know how many years of therapy I went through to get over that guilt for being proud of what I have. But you see how that works if you're not able to have initiative and what you do is understood. You see the difference? Another thing you might be looking at with children of this age, when they go to strangers, to everybody, and hug everybody, we see that with children that are removed from their homes and never really developed a relationship with their parents, they don't really know how to discriminate between who is good and who is bad. So it's not just the same as an outgoing child or an extrovert child that likes to talk to everybody. It's a little bit more a stronger reaction, like the child trusts everybody and maybe even holds them or hugs them inappropriately. Also, during this age, a child should be able to know their name, their first and their last name. When we talk about cognitive development, I want you to understand that children, like I gave you the example before, don't think the way adults do. They're more in a concrete thinker. They think about black and white and red, those colors, not the shades of those colors. They use logic, like if A equals B, then B equals C, then A equals C. So it's sort of like, if it maybe use a logic like, if I have an uncle that's really nice, then all uncles are really nice. They may think that. And they're able to look at the world just through their own eyes and their own experience. They obey rules to obtain favor. So if you have a rule, they may obey it better if they get some kind of reward for what they're doing. What a parent would like to treat a child or teach a child is that the reward is an eternal reward, an inside reward. For example, if the child accomplishes something, or maybe makes up their bed or keeps their room cleaned up, then you tell the child, you worked really hard at this, you did this yourself, you're able to do it yourself, so that they will be able to understand and take responsibility for their own behavior. Instead of giving money or candy or things like that for things that they do. Understanding that what you do has a consequence is learned better when the consequence is something you can internalize in yourself versus something from the outside. Okay. The next age group I'm going to talk about is ages 6 to 12 years. That's when children start going to school. They're in first and second grade until elementary school. I think you start going to middle school at 12 years. During this time, children are learning industry versus inferiority. So they're learning to have more control of themselves, and they're learning to test their knowledge and limits. So they're learning that they can do things, not only write and read, but they're learning to ride a bicycle, maybe skateboard, learning how to swim. All of those kind of activities and things that they learn to do themselves, then that gives them that sense of industry. They have inferiority when they feel like they can't do anything. In fact, there's a concept called learned helplessness. And this happens when you do everything for the child and they think they can't do it. Like you'll see a child at, 5 years old, they should be able to tie their own shoes. But now if mom ties their shoes all the time, then the child thinks, well, I can't tie my shoe, so someone always has to do that for me. If I can't choose my clothes or get dressed because my mom always does that for me, then the child's thinking that, I can't do that. Someone else has to do that for me. The rule of thumb is whatever a child can do for themselves, they should be able to do it. So if they can feed themselves, of course, if they can choose their clothes, if they can get dressed, brush their teeth themselves,